Let's return to the Grenfell Tower fire and the final report from the 7-year-long inquiry. And before we talk to our reporter, Nick Ellaby, at the report, her publication right now, let's hear a few words from Sir Martin Moore-Bick, the chair of the inquiry, talking about what happened and who's responsible. This is what he had to say.
The simple truth is that the deaths that occurred were all avoidable, and those who lived in the tower were badly failed over a number of years and in a number of different ways by those who were responsible for ensuring the safety of the building and its occupants. They include the government, the tenant management organisation, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, those who manufactured and supplied the materials used in the refurbishment, those who certified their suitability for use on high-rise buildings, the architect, the principal contractor, and some of its subcontractors, in particularly Harley Curtain Wall and its successor Harley Facades, some of the consultants, in particular the fire engineer ex-over Warrington Fire, the local authority's building control department, and the London Fire Brigade.
Well, that is a damning list of those involved. Pretty much anyone and everyone who had anything whatsoever to do with Grenfell Tower is having the finger pointed at them. Well, let's talk to our talk correspondent, Nick Ellaby. He was able to read the report in advance, joins us right now. It came out at 11 o'clock, and Sir Martin Moore-Bick has been giving a statement. We're going to be hearing from some of the victims' groups as well, Nick. But there's no doubt at all this is a hefty report. It's a detailed report, and he's pointed the finger at pretty much everybody involved, hasn't he?
Yes, good morning, Julia. Certainly a hefty report. I mean, the whole thing weighs about 10 kilos. We were given also a summary of it as well, which I've been looking through this morning. And as you've been hearing from the chair there, Sir Martin Moore-Bick, pointing the finger at a number of organisations and professionals in the industry. And really, that top line there of 72 deaths, in the summer of 2017, Grenfell Tower, all unavoidable. And the chair there saying that the residents were failed over a number of years by government organisations, by the professionals. And it's, in terms of the government, he's called the Department for Communities and Local Government badly run. And the report details that it was well aware of the fire safety risks of that material, the cladding and the insulation in that tower from 2016. And indeed, there'd been a number of other fires involving cladding back in 1991, Knowsley Heights in Liverpool. So the government had been aware of these problems for, 25 years, but had failed to act on that. And then in terms of those companies that sold and provided the cladding and the insulation, the report details systematic dishonesty. Some of those professionals gave evidence to the inquiry, 400 days of evidence it was in total, saying that they didn't mislead the market and the public, but the report finds that that's not true, actually, and testing was misrepresentative. Yeah. And the company that provided the cladding knew from 2013 that it was very combustible, and similar with the companies providing the insulation as well. And
but it was cheaper. Yeah, it was cheaper, and they'd make more money. They could put in a lower bid. They'd get the work, and that's what they did for the role. For Kensington and Chelsea to get the work. They put in the lowest bid, and they were basically going to claw back that money by making savings. And this is the thing that's so extraordinary. It's not just people not really paying much attention and not doing their job very well. As you say, it's systemic dishonesty. The retired judge said from cladding and insulation firms, but an abject failure by all the regulatory bodies, the council to look into this properly, to sign this off properly, and regulation by central government.
Yeah, and you mentioned the testing and the regulatory bodies. Actually, there's a real a damning accusation in the report that the governmental bodies that were in charge of that testing, working with the companies and the contractors, actually were complicit in misrepresenting testing, and even in one case allowing a company to add their own flame retardant boards to the material during the tests, but then sell that cladding without the fire retardant material, thus rendering the tests completely useless. And actually, another thing I thought was interesting, you mentioned the local borough of Kensington and Chelsea, who've been accused of cutting corners and cutting costs and really neglecting the residents in that tower block. But also, the report found the people that emerged with the greatest credit are the local community groups, the volunteer groups that provided much needed care and support to those families and the bereaved in the hours and the days following the fire. And in terms of the recommendations, Julia, the report is recommending that all fire safety is brought under a single Secretary of State to have some better joined-up approach on all this, and also a College of Fire Safety be set up, more fire engineers, that job of fire engineer be better recognised, and that the UK train up more of them, and also the housing management companies have better plans to evacuate people who need assistance, because we've heard some of the harrowing stories of the people that weren't able to get out of that tower block, partly due to the London Fire Brigades not lifting their stay-put order till some 1 hour, 45 minutes after they were called, but also their inability to get out of that block, and some of those people that were forced to shelter in the top floor flat, including a 12-year-old girl, Jessica Urbano Ramirez, who called the fire department many times and had to relocate. The fire officers couldn't reach her, and also the report details that some of those officers were not given adequate training, and actually the payout, the cost of this report so far is higher than the payouts given to the bereaved and the families in Grenfell. And what those families want to see is a criminal investigation, and this inquiry has delayed that investigation, and I don't think we're going to see any criminal proceedings, certainly any charges, until 2027. That's a full decade after the report, and it's just raking up all this terrible, painful memories for everybody involved.
Yeah, indeed. And at the same time, 340,000 people still living in 11,000 blocks, buildings that which still have similar cladding, still at risk, nothing having been done. It's an abject failure before, during and after. You mentioned the fire brigade. They just must mention, though, they did come in for criticism, and they have previously in the phase 1 report, failure of the stay-put advice. But again, that was based on what they thought the building, was. They thought that, fire safety measures were in place, that it didn't have flammable, combustible cladding on the outside. Why would you think it did? Who would do that, But failure to adjust that, it was sort of the computer says no attitude, which did cost lives and risk the lives of many firefighters as well, who didn't have the full equipment they needed. But again, there is literally nobody involved in authority at all in this who comes out of this with anything other than, blood on their hands.
No, absolutely not. I mean, you mentioned the individual firefighters were doing very, very difficult job in really unbelievable circumstances, and the report details a lack of training given to those officers, but it does say a chronic lack of effective management and leadership at the London Fire Brigade. The woman in charge did actually leave her post earlier than she intended to because of this, but there are recommendations that I think really the problem was that the lack of integration with what was going on in the control room and what the firefighters were getting and the information they were getting on the ground, and also some of their communications had went down. The report also recommends that all firefighters have digital radios, so they do keep those communications if anything like this, God forbid, were to happen again.
I mean, that's the thing. So many of these recommendations are just so basic and such common sense and stuff that I think we all thought would have been in place already, and it's taken 7 years. We know a lot of those recommendations were also made in phase 1 report a few years ago, so that have actually already been enacted. But as you say, the families, those who are bereaved, those affected, still waiting for justice to be done. I mean, certainly, we need people to be put behind bars. It's as simple as that. Nick Ellaby, I know you're going to be talking to us throughout the rest of the day. Really appreciate you joining us there. He's live from Dorland House, where we've seen that massive big report published. His talk, The Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, also Claire Pearsall joining me. Just that the families of those who lost loved ones in Grenfell, those who had to evacuate and was able to evacuate back in 2017, they've criticised the institutional indifference that they have encountered. This, of course, after the final report from the inquiry has basically said that all the deaths were avoidable and there was incompetence, dishonesty and greed at the root of the cause of these deaths. Absolutely astonishing report there. Although really doesn't astonishing, yet it tells us something we already knew, did it not? But let's go straight to your calls. Tom is on the line. He's in Milton Keynes. He's called up on 0344 499 1000 to have his say. Tom, thank you so much for calling in. You wanted to have a word about this report.
Yes, I was a resident engineer in London in the 70s, 80s and 90s, before the disillusionment of the Greater London Council. At that time, the Greater London Council had district surveyors covering the various districts in London. Each surveyor and each district had a guy that was a specialist in electrical work, plumbing work, fire installation. And these guys would come down and scrutinise your installation to the nth degree. And before you could even let a building be taken over as an office, the fire brigade used to have to come and clear it.
Well, that's what I thought was the norm. But hold on a minute. Even an inspector who knows all about fire safety, they've gone in, they look at the cladding on this building that was on Grenfell and many other buildings, and they'd gone, well, show me the safety certificate. It says it's safe. It's been tested. They go, yeah, fine, and sign it off, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
They don't know it's made of combustible material.
If you brought a piece of material in that looked a bit suspect, a simple thing like a little lighter would see whether it catch fire or not.
Sorry, it's so obvious, isn't it? I mean, literally, they do that. Go, I'm not sure about it. I haven't seen this before. Let's have a look.
It's been done. I was representing the consultant, and my job was to scrutinise the quality and quantity and the control of contractors on buildings.
Here's a really good way of testing whether it's going to go on fire easy or not. Put a lighter under it. Yeah.
And there was lots of things about fire spread, how quickly a flame would go across a surface. Yeah. People were very, 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 very fastidious about fire stopping between what they call compartments, so that one compartment, the fire couldn't spread to another.
Which was what was supposed to happen in these tower blocks. That's why the stay put advice was there. We can contain the fire in one section, but not, of course, if it's going up the outsides of the building on the cladding. Tom, thank you for your call. Tom in Milton Keynes there. Claire Bissell, you had the same reaction. It's laughable, isn't it? But, like, here's a good way of finding out if this cladding can go on fire or not. Put a lighter on it.
Absolutely. And the quality of these materials, if you haven't seen before, you don't need expensive tests, as you say, just a lighter.
It's new and it's a lot cheaper. I wonder why. Yeah, exactly. Well, and again, the contractors knew why. That's why the fingers are being pointed. It is just extraordinary, the stuff. How do these people sleep at night? How do they sleep at night, knowing what they did? It's extraordinary. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. First up, we're going to be talking about the Grenfell Tower report, a massive big report, took 7 years, headed by Sir Martin Moore-Bick. I remember the big outcry when he was first appointed to the role. It was like this establishment, posh man, judge, why on earth, would you want him to be... two other panel members were basically fought for by the families and by survivors. But this is a hard-hitting report. There's just no doubt at all. He's saying quite clearly that every single one of these lives could have been saved if people had done things differently, and that starts with government regulation, the local council cutting costs. He's absolutely damning about the cladding companies, the building companies, everyone involved, the fire safety people, sign-offs. Everybody pretty much gets the finger pointed at them, and clear. He says systemic dishonesty. He says greed has played an important part. Incompetence, dishonesty, and greed. But because we're still 7 years on, hasn't brought back a single person. 340,000 people still in buildings that are unsafe. 11,000 buildings still 7 years on still have unsafe cladding. And here we are still waiting for those people to be safe. The Grenfell United, the Survivors and Bereaved Families group, they gave a statement in the last few minutes and they said justice has not been delivered. The chair of the group, Natasha Elcock, says the inquiry report reveals that whenever there's a clash between corporate interest and public safety, governments have done everything they can to avoid their responsibilities to keep people safe. The system isn't broken. It was built this way. You worked in government, Claire. Is that true?
No, I don't think it is true. I don't want to take anything away from those that have lost loved ones. I mean, you can't imagine what any of this was like. I think governments work badly when it comes to times of crisis like that, because you have too many people trying to be in charge. And I think that one of the recommendations to bring it all, fire safety, into one area is more sensible than anything else I've heard.
One particular body in government that's going to oversee it rather than across. But again, you know, these things, I mean, you know, frankly, a 6-year-old could have worked that out.
Well, absolutely. It doesn't take much.
But I've said there's pretty much nothing in this that I found as a surprise. We kind of knew. We knew a lot of this within, frankly, a week. We knew a lot of this a day after the fire, to be honest with you. Of course, that tower's still sitting there, so a horrible, horrible blight on the landscape and a horrible reminder to people as well. Look, let's talk to Julie Fraser right now. She's a campaigner at End Our Cladding Scandal. They're calling on the government to lead an urgent national effort to fix these cladding and building safety crises that are still ongoing. Julie, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi there, Julia.
Thank you. I mean, look, this report, it's damning, it's hard-hitting. There's no doubt at all Sir Martin does not pull his punches. You know, he points the finger clearly, squarely at pretty much everybody. Does it say enough? Is it what you wanted to hear?
As you just said previously, it's no surprise what has been written today. And we now need the new Labour government, Keir, if you're listening, please, now really get a grip on this situation. The previous government they tried. Michael Gove, he really, I believe, did his best. And we moved a lot further forward than we had been previously.
There were efforts, weren't there? He was housing secretary about sort of basically, you know, squaring up with the building companies to say you're going to take down this cladding at your own expense. But there was a huge cost to the taxpayer from this. But we've still got 340,000 people living with unsafe cladding in their buildings.
Yes, as you said, 11,000 buildings. My building being one of them, that is set for remediation, but it's been delayed.
And when did you discover it had that kind of cladding that was dangerous?
2 years after Grenfell, 2019.
And so you're still, do you own your flat?
Well, we don't really own them, do we? We own the lease.
You're the leaseholder. But either way, you can't sell it because no one's going to buy a flat.
No.
You'd have to reveal that when you sold it. No one in their right minds would do it. I imagine a mortgage company won't give a mortgage because they don't know what the cost is going to be for those refurbishments. And I've spoken to people in the past from your organisation where they're getting the work done, but they're being given bills of 200 grand to have the work done. Each flat. So people haven't got that sort of money. So you're stuck in a home every day that could go up in flames like Grenfell did, like the building block in Dagenham only last week did, and there's nothing really you can do about it.
There's absolutely nothing. I'm quite fortunate, actually. I'll just correct you on that because I don't actually live in my apartment anymore.
Thank goodness.
I rent it out.
But still, that person.
Yeah, I've got many friends who live in there, and at the end of this, but the financial cost is horrendous, no doubt. But at the end of all this, you look at the survivors of Grenfell, what they went through. 72 people lost their lives, and people are still living in these buildings that are completely unsafe. Yeah. They could, a fire could hit any time, and height it just shouldn't even come into it. There are buildings under 11 metres. They get no help, financial help.
Well, that's it. It was originally it was help for buildings over 18 metres, and then it was 11 metres. And people were saying, look, these buildings are all unsafe if you can't get out of them when they're on fire.
Absolutely. You might be able to get out of a smaller building quicker, but at the end of the day, it can still set on fire. You're still at risk. Yeah. And so all those people, we actually figure there's nearer to 600,000 people living in these buildings. Right. Every night they go to bed in fear that could happen to them. And I have to say today our thoughts have to be with the Grenfell community. Absolutely. What they've gone through, are still going through, and the government now, they have to prosecute. These are criminals.
This is it. There's no doubt at all, and there's no doubt at all that the inquiry chair, Sir Martin Moore-Bick, he's pointing the finger. He goes through a very long list. We played a clip earlier. Here are all the people to blame. But what we need is not just sort of corporate manslaughter charges and negligence or whatever. We need individuals to take responsibility, because it's quite clear from the evidence that we heard throughout those 7 years and many, many, many days of evidence that there are people who they weren't just a bit, slipshod in their attitude to these things. They actively knew that they were testing cladding, knowing it was flammable, knowing it could go up in flames any time, knowing that it was a risk. Well, let's say, well, if we put this non-combustible board on either side, oh, now it passes the test, and then selling it when it's going to be put on a building without those fire safety precautions, knowing that, somehow still sleeping at night, which is what blows my mind, that they did that. That, I don't know on what basis that anyone involved in that shouldn't be behind bars right now.
They should be. And as hopefully Keir Starmer and his new government will do exactly that. Yeah. They might have said it's going to be at least a year to 18 months. Why? I mean, really, why? All the evidence is there now. People have been named. Get a grip. Put them behind bars. It's murder. There's no doubt about it. It's murder. Yeah. How many more people have to die in that way for them to actually realise what has been going on? They know. They've known all along.
And this is it. They knew before. And again, in Germany, this kind of cladding, I remember knowing this the day after the Grenfell fire. I was looking into all this the day after, because actually it was the Grenfell residents had raised this in their own documents, which I read online. I mean, again, the council could read them because I was able to find them, saying that German authorities had banned this cladding because they'd found it unsafe after a near fatal fire. Seems to me that anyone who manufactured, tested, commissioned, put on and approved this cladding, I mean, this is no different to someone tampering with your car's brakes and then saying, "Can you drive at 70 on a motorway?" There's no difference. It's the same thing, and you'd prosecute that person.
You would. It just makes me so angry. I mean, today myself personally, I'm full of so many different emotions. Yeah. Anger being one of them. I was really emotional this morning listening to Sir Martin reading out, parts from the report. Those people from Grenfell are reliving all of that disaster that evening. They're reliving this again today in a really horrendous way. And for 7 years they've gone through this. Why has it taken so long? Yeah. I mean, the cladding on my building, the government actually said some years ago that it was absolutely fine. They knew it wasn't. Yeah. HPL cladding is not fine. And the really thing that crawls me, I believe that if you added certain chemicals to these materials, it could be completely inflammable. Really? But it's down to cost again.
Well, and this is something that Sir Martin said is down to incompetence, dishonesty, and greed. But again, imagine putting money ahead of lives of innocent people. That's the astonishing thing. Well, you're still fighting. You're still trying to get the cladding off. Remedial work plan. Again, that's what lots of people are being told. Again, what amazes me is often this is being done at the cost of those leaseholders, as opposed to the cost of the companies that put it on. None of which, as companies, should still be in existence anyway, because they should all have been. Every single person should be in prison, if you ask me. But again, it all comes down fundamentally to me to the government, because we know there are going to be cowboys, we know there are going to be people who do dodgy things, and that's why you have regulation, that's why you have people who are supposed to check these things to make sure that money is not the issue. They're just talking about safety, and that fundamentally has got to come down to government regulatory failure, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And as we said, it's all down to cost. They've known since, was it 1991, 30 plus years ago, that these materials were not good. Yeah. So, and they've allowed it, the building regulations were not fit for purpose. But that's an excuse that now the developers use. Yeah. Well, we followed the regulations at the time, and they were fully aware.
They knew what they were doing.
Of course they did.
Julie, I so appreciate you joining us. I'm so sorry you're going through this, and it's just simply by bad luck that you're in that situation. Anyone else, and indeed in Grenfell as well. But you happen to be one of those people in those homes. that has this, but keep on fighting. We'll do everything we can to make sure, we publicise your cause and hold the government to account. Julie Fraser, campaigner at End Our Cladding Scandal, thank you very much indeed. Claire Pearsall, your reaction, but also just want to read out a statement we've just had from Councillor Elizabeth Campbell. She's the leader of Kensington and Chelsea Council. She says, on behalf of the council, I apologise unreservedly with my whole heart to the bereaved survivors and residents of Grenfell for our failure to listen and to protect them. The inquiry has laid bare the chain of events that led to that night. We fully accept its findings, which are a withering critique of a system broken from top to bottom. It shows beyond doubt that this council failed the residents of Grenfell Town, the 72 people, including 18 children who died. We failed to keep people safe before and during the refurbishment, and we failed to treat people with humanity and care in the aftermath. We will learn. Oh, we hear that, don't we? It's all good up to that point. We will learn from every single criticism in the report. We will take time to study it further in detail, reflect, blah, 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 blah at that point. But, I mean, those are strong words. But there isn't anywhere for anyone to hide. You're going to have to issue statements like that, aren't you?
Well, of course you do. I mean, that's what you would expect. And I think it needed to be shorter than that because, as you say, it's the stuff that we've all heard before.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And again, we're hearing from our guest Julie Fraser, and we've heard from the other people in the organisation. I mean, she's rented her flat out. Again, do you have to say to the person you're renting out, by the way, this is an unsafe building? But people are stuck in these homes now. There was a lot of talk, I remember, early on in this, that this was a class thing, this was a race thing. It was because these were largely poor people living in these flats in Grenfell. These lot of them were immigrants, and we discovered an awful lot, actually illegal immigrants who basically were given leave to stay. Basically, come forward, let us know who you are, because you're not going to be deported. We need to know if everyone's accounted for, was the main thing. A lot of people subletting their apartments. We've had, scores of people, I think, have been convicted of fraud as a result of this again. Yeah. But none of that takes away from how badly people were treated before and during and after the Grenfell fire and what happened with the cladding. But the claim was that it was poor people, it was people of colour, no one cared, it was Kensington Council, they were a Tory council, you didn't care about the poor people, But we know there are, plenty of people who live in blocks, in flats that they own, white middle class, who are having exactly the same issues. This was tried to be turned into a nasty Tories hating poor black people. That's what they tried to turn it into. It's nothing of the sort. No. They hated everybody.
It was not anything to do with race or class. And if you look across the country, these buildings and this sort of cladding is in evidence in very many different areas. So different populations, different ethnicities, different classes. It's just widespread, and I think that's where we need to go. The largest contributor, according to Martin Moore-Bick, the systematic dishonesty of the manufacturers of the cladding.
Yeah. Fundamentally, they lied. Yeah. I just don't see a way in which these people don't get prosecuted and don't, frankly...
start with them and then work down.
But again, we still need people... Again, we still rely on governments and councils or elected representatives and people in public bodies to keep us safe from the charlatans, from the cowboys, and that's their job. They can't pass the buck.